Hey, good news. This is the How I Lead episode where you get to meet Brenda Angle. A long story of how I got connected to Brenda, but I'm so glad I did. And we wanted to rush this episode because it is time sensitive. There's some cool things happening that Brenda's involved with. But obviously, first of all, in this episode, we talk about being a leader in the church who has been divorced and what that's like, and how do you reconcile some of those feelings when you feel sidelined, whether it's because of a divorce or other things. And a really fascinating discussion. I think many will benefit. It's almost like two episodes in one that we have here, because that first part we talk about her leadership experience, her journey through being divorced, but also then later serving in some leadership callings and having more of a full heart for those who have had a similar life experience. And then we talk about Brenda's humanitarian efforts. And she's been involved in Africa, in Eastern Africa, in so many ways. And many of you know, whether you remember it or not, but President Nelson has announced the temple in Nairobi, Kenya, that's actually done and about to have the open house and things. And Brenda talks about this interesting dynamic of how members in Africa sometimes don't have, they're so far away from temples at times, they don't really have a full concept of what the temple is and why they should be excited about it and those things. And so she's organizing a really cool trip where she's getting as many Latter-day Saints as possible just to get to the dedication and the open house of the Nairobi temple. Now you may think, well, wait a minute, Kurt, why don't you just wait and have them go when they're ready to take out their endowments, right? Well, the church has funding and things to actually get the members there for their endowment, but this is kind of the step before that, where we help members kind of shift that paradigm of really understanding the holiness of the temple, what the temple is. We want them to touch and feel and walk through the temple, and then that propels them on this path of actually going through the temple for their own endowment. So really big deal that this part of the world is getting a temple like everywhere else. And so there, listen to the end and look for links in the show notes about ways that we're going to kind of do a flash fundraiser for this group that Brenda's putting together in order to get Latter-day Saints in Eastern Africa to experience the temple. So it's going to be awesome. And let's jump into this interview. Here we go. My interview with Brenda Angle. Brenda Angle, welcome to the Leading Saints podcast.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Yeah, this is a quick one. We're hoping to turn around pretty fast. We'll explain why, but through various networks and connections, we were able to connect. And you're just one of those people I come across from time to time. I'm just so intrigued by your background and experience on so many other facets. And I think you put it well before I hit record that how did you put it? You exist to help struggling saints. Is that a fair way to put it?
I do. That's what I spend my life doing. I love it. And yes.
Nice.
I call it making my mess my message and helping other people to take theirs and doing something good with it. So
nice. And so that's led to you being a life coach, to being an author, and any other realms that we should mention?
Oh man, being a mom of 9
Oh, yeah.
kids and 40
9 kids. Wow.
grandkids and just life. Life is the greatest teacher. That's been my greatest tutor.
Yeah,
Besides the Savior. Sure. Yes.
And what are you seeing, like, just speaking generally, when I talk with individuals like you or therapists or, people who interact with Latter-day Saints sort of on that real, just the real level, right? The authentic level. Like, what are you seeing out there? What are people struggling with? What are the typical concerns you run into? Just generally speaking.
I would say number one is just knowing who we are. And I know President Nelson's asked us that when we can find out who we are, it resolves a lot of issues. And trust, just trusting. There's a lot of anxiety, which means we're struggling with just trusting, and we're trying to fix things. We're trying to make things work. We're trying to figure them out, but we're forgetting to trust. And it's hard when you've been through hard things. So I think those two components are maybe the biggest that I see.
Yeah. Because, we often, just like any group of humans, we point towards ideals of life, and we point towards frameworks in life that help, like the gospel. It's a phenomenal framework. Now, is it, 100% as far as giving you all your wish and dreams and taking all problems out of your life? I think all of us, chuckle if anybody said that. And so life gets messy, like you said, right? And so how do we navigate that? That mess is often where people struggle.
And that struggle is where we get strong. So it's like we knew we were going to have that. it's part of life, but man, when it hits us, we're like, wow, and I don't know what to do with this now. Even though I supposedly have all the textbook answers, it's like, okay, now it's real. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
So,
Tell
yeah.
me a little bit about. I haven't had a chance to read your book. Have you published more than one book, or?
I have 2 books, Why Not Me?
Okay.
And then Breaking the Yokes That Bind Us. That's like 64 simple little things to help break out and move forward. And I love those. Those are assignments I give people, uh, usually what I speak on when I speak. Just lots of just simple tools, doctrine, principles,
Hmm.
some really fun things, some deep things that just like, if you're in a rut, here we go. Try some of these.
Yeah.
So,
And obviously the why not me is sort of playing off of the question that a lot of us ask is why me? Why am I suffering all
exactly.
these struggles and adversities? And so you kind of can flip that and find deeper meaning.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. We're usually all brought to our knees and asked that question at one point, which I have definitely done myself. And we got to find a bigger perspective, a bigger purpose to the pain and the struggle, and that can
Hmm.
open up our life for us and get us going. So
Yeah.
it's good.
You mentioned as we were talking about this interview, just some left turns that maybe your life have taken as far as things you didn't expect. You found yourself single later on in life. You mentioned 9 kids, and that.
Yeah.
What do you remember from that as far as just your relationship with the church and what that meant for you going forward? What points should be highlighted there?
Well, I remember thinking during that if I wasn't a member of church, this would be so much easier because I'd had a lot of callings. I knew everybody. Our home was the gathering place. Like we were sort of like, my kids were amazing kids. And yeah, it got really hard. So the the gospel part of it and navigating through what even priesthood leaders thought and how all of that got tough, like really 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 tough. And I'm so grateful for it because I'll have people say, oh my goodness, Brenda, look what's going on, like I'm not believed, I'm being sidelined, I'm being this. I'm like, hey, I can probably top your story, but you know what, we get to, this is where we get to show where we're at, and we're going to get through this and move through it. And I know how you feel and I understand. And so let's get going. Let's hold
Yeah,
on, because if you don't hold on, where are you going to be at? And so that's my biggest thing with like singles that really get kicked in the gut. And it's so common and very seems to be getting more common, and which is sad and tragic, but yeah,
yeah.
so
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but did you kind of feel like you were on this path, like the storybook path of like, are you doing all the things? You had the great family, the gathering
oh
place. You were the family that maybe a lot of people looked up to, and then suddenly you're
yes,
not. And so, people in our community, whether they intend this or not, they kind of don't know how to approach you, how to engage with you anymore, how to talk about
yeah.
members of your family, or I don't know. Like, is that a
They
fair
don't
way
they
to
don't know
frame that?
what to do. They don't know
Yeah.
what to do. Like, I remember going to church for at least 6 months and having people just avoid me. And here I'm like Miss Social, like I have served everybody there. I'm like, and all of a sudden, boom. And it's not because they're bad people or anything. It's because they
Yeah.
don't know how to handle. And in my case, they'd heard a lot of things that maybe maybe that's what they believed or it's all they knew. And so, I had a man come up to me one time and just, this is after months of being there alone, and just put his arm around me. He didn't say anything. He just put his arm around me and he hugged me and he walked away.
Hmm.
And I was in such a rough place. And I spent all day making that man a strawberry pie. I just wanted to thank him for reaching out. But I decided if I know somebody's struggling, I'm not going to let them go through it alone. I can't. I want to be there with them.
Yeah, and I guess and I feel like we all know this stuff, but it's just a good reminder and to talk with somebody who's maybe been through it, where it's just the simple moments of like, oh, there they are at church, they're sitting by themselves, or I'm going to make sure
Yeah.
just say hello for 30 seconds and chat and check in and let
Yeah.
them know that we love them, type of thing, right?
Absolutely. It's priceless. I can't even emphasize that. Just be present with them. And the details don't matter. Sometimes we want to know, like, well, what happened? Like this family, like, what's it? And, uh, most people still don't know, and it doesn't even matter. It
Yeah.
matters that we mourn with people that mourn, that we keep our baptismal covenants, that we are there to help succor them. And that's what matters. And there are
Yeah.
some people that are so good at it. And I want to get good at that. I just want to be good at being present with them and, helping them move
Yeah.
through it. So,
Yeah. And I think there is, I don't know, I don't want to make something that's not there, but I've thought about somehow creating some episodes, some content around this dynamic of, like for example, the stake president who called me as bishop is now divorced, and
yeah,
we're in touch, and I've run into other stake presidents, bishops who either end up divorced or they just have this complete life changing dynamic. And before it was sort of so easy to approach these people. They're, we can put them in a box. They are the church leader. They've sort of figured it out. Like they're the sage. Like they have some good advice. And then when they're not, we're sort of like, and I know a lot of people can sometimes approach those past leaders, those past, respectable people. That's sort of where
absolutely.
we've classified them in a way of like, maybe you did something wrong. If you only did more of that, or, you must have broke this, when in reality, it's just mortality a lot of the time. Right.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
And it can be a faith crisis. Like when we hold people up so high, it's our expectations of them. And I think we've got to be really careful of that it can help like hurt our own testimony, which our testimony shouldn't be in that. But sometimes
Right.
we just put some, even apostles, or, we've gone through things where people find, fault with the prophet or whatever. And it's like, it's really, our relationship to God and ourselves, and getting back on our lane and living in our lane and not letting
Hmm.
that take us out. But it is very difficult to see. And we have a lot of pain with that. We hate to see really good people um, go through those kind of tragic things. It's awful
Yeah.
for us. But the Lord sees a different path and plan, and we're all here for experience, and we've got to leave it to Him.
So how long has it been now since you've been single?
10 years, I'm
Okay.
thinking around that. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And you mentioned to me like you sort of, it sounds like you went through a period where you weren't sure where you fit and do it all in the church, and the
Oh,
community wasn't sure where you fit. Right. But then suddenly there were some callings that came your way, and did you kind of feel like you found that place again?
I did. I was this. I believe the Lord compensates us for our losses. That's
Yeah.
like great quote and He promised me that when I was at my lowest, that He would compensate me, and He has. And you got to hold on for that too. And all of it hasn't happened, but much of it has. So I moved out of the area that I was in, which was really needful, and moved to another place, and was immediately given a pretty good church calling as far as busy and leadership. And I cried for like a month because
Hmm.
I'd already done that. And I just, I don't know. It was direction for me on what the Lord wanted me to do for the next little bit. So that
So
was,
you cried in a way of like you did not want to do this type of thing.
I didn't want to do it, but I
Uh
knew
huh.
I knew it was, and it helped save me. Like service saves us. Like I am the biggest proponent of service,
Yeah.
and getting in there and loving people and losing yourself in that. And what I noticed is this place that I was in, nobody judged me. They're like, "Oh, did your husband die or something?" And I'd have to say, "Well," like I couldn't say the D word for 5 years. Like I couldn't even say it. I was so embarrassed.
Yeah.
But people, they were so good, and they took me anyway. I was able to serve and love, and then I got another calling, and that one, and just for reference, I'll just tell you there was a stake relief study president, because when I got that, and I was
Hmm.
coaching a lot of singles, that a lot of people had been divorced, and they thought they were sidelined by the church with callings, or like, I don't even have a calling, or I've been, one guy told me, I've been the door greeter for 5 years. And I said, well, be a good one. And he said, I am the best one. And I said, okay, I want you to move up front in church. And so he moved up front and was called to be Sunday school president anyway. So there's a part of
Yeah.
us that have got to not hang back and get in there, right? So anyway, I'm talking to singles, and they're like, "So what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I just got called to be stake release site president. I know it's like kind of like strange." And they're like, "What? We didn't know you could do that. Like, is this a new policy?" And I'm like, "I don't think so." I'm
Yeah.
I think even my dad, okay, so this is funny. He's a bishop twice, stake presidency for 9 years, 10 years. And he's like, "Brenda, I didn't know they could do that." So anyway, I blew people's minds. It's like, but I love that because I had people come up and say, "That makes me feel good that we aren't we aren't just like damaged and can't ever be." And it's like, no, we're still the same people. We're going to still serve
Yeah.
and we're still going to do what God. And my favorite place is just being a ministering sister. Like that's my favorite. And I don't care where I'm at, but that was interesting that um that it did help people to know that that was a possibility, which I know that happens
Yeah.
all over the church, but yeah.
You've said this word a few times as far as feeling sidelined. That's an interesting concept to me. And I remember even in my own experience where I went through this like decade of like various like, church leadership assignments from bishopric to being the bishop to being in the stake presidency. And then it was all over. We moved and, it was sort of over. And for years, it kind of had this feeling, not that I would frame it this way, but I kind of felt like I was being sidelined. Like, don't they know like the experience I bring to
Yeah. Oh,
this
yeah.
place, and I could just help out so much if they just put me in that chair, and
Totally.
I could, and it wasn't so much I was being sidelined. It was just like, no, that season is just over for now,
That's right.
and now I'm serving as an elders quorum president. Kind of feel like I'm been
Yeah.
reintroduced for this season as long as it'll
Yeah.
last. And but it is like I think the adversary really works on that. Like, isn't it awful now that you're sitting the bench? Like they don't want you and these things.
Yeah, why
Yeah,
do we make something out of these callings? Because we're all people just serving, and it can be tough when you don't have that, responsibility anymore. But sometimes it's just the really cool experience of being close to people and serving people. And while I've never missed getting changed from a calling, really, I do miss that connection with people. And so that's a
yeah,
great blessing. But you can get that in nursery. Oh my goodness, I love
sure.
that. So
Yeah, and reframing that really helped me of thinking like, with my experience, like the things I've been able to experience up to this point, the callings I've had, it really makes me a different kind of member. And so I'm gonna re-engage. I'm
yeah,
gonna be a leader without that formal calling and reach out to maybe those that are literally on the sidelines or those that
yes,
that need more ministering. I can actually do that. Where when I was a bishop, I was too busy. I couldn't take time to sit with that person in the foyer or do this or that. Now I can, and so to me, I just this is a asset that I have, my experience, and I can be a better regular, Joe Schmo church member. So
absolutely. Well, on
yeah,
the
that's
other side
awesome.
of that, I've had a lot of people coaching them that say, "I've never had a calling of any significance." And I'm like, "Well, what does that mean?" But,
Yeah,
it's like they always it's like they've always wanted to have something, never have. And I think we just put so much on that. And that's it goes back again to having high expectations for those people and those callings as well. We just have to be so careful about. And some of the greatest people ever were just scout leaders for like 30 years. I know a guy just 30 years just
right.
serving these kids. Like, what is better than that? Like, really? And but why do we do this? I don't know.
Yeah, it's human nature, right? And
It's
and
human
I think
nature. It's
sometimes in these more saturated areas of the church, there's just
yeah,
a lot of people who can serve, and so these seasons come and go, and I have to remind myself that a lot of it's just I'm not in that season. That's okay, and but others get the
it's all right.
opportunity because if I was called as bishop again, my heart would almost hesitate and break, be like, wait, like there's others that need this opportunity. Like
Yeah, yeah,
I've had my go, like give it to someone
yeah,
else, and so
yeah.
it's interesting for
That's
sure.
right.
Anything else about that time as being a single divorcee, in as a stake relief society president that comes to mind?
Well, I feel like that I I feel like the best part of that was having people get hope in the fact that I knew their pain and I knew their struggles, and it was a really highly leadership stake. People had been leaders all over the world, and just
Hmm.
a really anyway. And so I really did feel like that was one of the purposes for me to be there, was to really have empathy, which is what our trials teach us, to have empathy for those who are struggling and to be able to put my arm around them. And they would just say, it means something because you know what I'm going through.
Mm.
And that's a great opportunity. And that's why I tell people, whatever your struggle is, reach out to those that have the same one, because they'd rather hear from someone who had a son, a child die, or someone commit suicide, talk to them, than
Mm.
someone like me that has not gone through that. And so I think
Yeah.
that was great. But I got to rub shoulders with some of the most amazing leaders. And what the Lord did was He compensated me completely with. I remember sitting down in the first stake meeting with our stake president, and he got out a pencil and paper, and he just said, "Tell me what the women need.
Mm.
Tell me what you want us to do." And that had not been my experience before when I was stake relief society president. It had really come a long ways. And I didn't know what to even say. I'm like, whoa, but it was just such a great experience to see how we're growing and coming, and we're just moving in a great direction there. So I love that. I loved
Yeah.
that experience.
So I got to ask, maybe you don't remember, but what did you say when he pulled out that pen and paper?
Oh, I had stuff. Oh, I had so much stuff. Yes, I did. The first thing that I told him was that I want the bishops to connect with Relief Society presidents on a weekly, if not a couple times
Mm.
a month basis. Most of my Relief
Hmm.
Society presidents were not meeting with their bishops and things like that. So it's like, that's why we're in there, is to help bring in this other side and say, oh yes. And yeah, I had a
That's
good
cool.
list.
That's cool. And I just love that exercise of like, not that the stake president has to do everything that you mentioned, but
No.
that would be great. You probably felt very heard by the time you left that office that day. Um, any other advice that comes to mind? I'm just thinking of those maybe who've gone through a divorce, and because I think a lot of leaders go to a place of like, well, let's give them space. Let's not give them a calling. They have so much stress already. They're trying to do that with a big heart, when in reality, the member going through all that can interpret of like, oh, now I'm kind of being alienated in my ward. Any advice you give to church leaders as far as like those individuals are sort of fresh off a divorce?
I just helped a guy in the stake presidency back in Georgia. He's assigned over the single adults, and it is so tough because you've got such a wide variety and every spectrum. And some want to be invited over for Thanksgiving dinner, and some
Mhm.
feel dumb and don't want to. And so I think it's just approaching it very careful. Find out what could I do to help bless your life? Like, would you love to be involved with our family? Would you love for, how could we best serve you? And that's where ministering brothers and sisters could really come into play. But um, it
Yeah.
just finding out what, because some want to come to the activities and some are like, I will not cross that threshold. Like, it's so
Mhm.
scary. And so you've just got all over widows, divorced, some have never been married, some never have children. Like, everyone is just so unique, and it really takes a spirit um and to be present with them and figure out what it is that's important for them. But
Yeah.
everyone needs to feel loved and wanted
Yeah.
and valued in callings or in as a ward member. Like, they really need to be a part of that family.
Yeah. I bet it's tricky just because those individuals probably don't know exactly what they need. They're kind of
Yeah,
just
that's
trying
exactly.
to find
Oh,
their footing as it is. So I would always say, I think, what I typically see just in general when somebody goes through a difficult time is like maybe the church leader reaches out early in the process, but then they kind of get busy or distracted, and then 6, 7, 8
mhm.
months go by, and that person thinks, man, they haven't even checked back in, or so just that touch point is on a regular basis
That
saying, hey, I'm
is
just checking in.
such a good point. It's just some consistency there, especially with leadership, means a lot, because we often see the bishop or stake president, maybe kind of how we might see the savior in there, is like trying to connect to him and feeling his love through them, and because
Hmm.
they are in that place in the church. And while it's not 100% the right way to do it, but there is definitely something, because they do have stewardship over us, and it's hard to feel like you're floundering and like
Yeah.
and kind of pushed aside. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Really good. All right. Like I mentioned, there's so many angles and topics that we can talk about in with your background and things. Tell me about your humanitarian work in Africa. How did that all get started?
Well, like I said, service is just something that works every time. If we are in a tough place and we can find somewhere, it could be next door neighbor, it could be your ministering sisters and brothers, it could be anything. I love all of those, but for some reason, I just had this draw to humanitarian in Africa, and very blessed to be able to go down with a group and get involved in that. As I got in it, I started, branching out. I loved working with church members. This little branch, it was like 10 members, and now it's like got 150 in. And every time we go, there's baptisms. These people are just coming and going. It just fills your soul. It's so exciting to see the saints in Africa so happy and joyful, and they just love God. And what started me off when we'd go down, we'd do days for girls, kids, and we'd talk to the girls about how special they are and how much God loves them, because they aren't often treated that way. And uh, in fact, they're devalued as a person, seen more as something God gave the men to be used. And so we would talk to the girls. So when I went down there, I said, I'm going to talk to the boys. And they're like, "Oh, no, we don't talk to the boys." And I'm like, "Well, I'm going to, because I can't tell the girls how special they are without teaching the boys." And I just taught them the proclamation that God wants you to protect the women. And they're like, "God wants us to?" I'm like, "Yes, he does." And they love God. So it was just like, oh my goodness, I leave these groups and these boys put their fists in the air, and I'm like, "What is your responsibility to women?" And they're like, "We are their protectors." And they took it literally, walking by my side, I'm like, okay, just protecting. It was just
Yeah,
so fun because they love God. These people love God. And so I can talk about anywhere I go. And anyway, so we got into this branch, a couple of the branches down there, and helping them. And I had a young man that I gave a Book of Mormon to, and he and I just so connected. And he joined the church, baptized 15 people right off. And he's just this awesome kid. Wow. What a miracle and a blessing. So anyway, that's Africa. I love it. I've been there probably about 14 times. I've connected up with Molly, who, tell all of you out there listening, watch his movie, Mully, Molly from Kenya. He was just the guest speaker, the guest at the Christmas concert for,
oh cool.
I keep saying Tabernacle Choir, and that's not how you say it, but
No, that's a Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square, right?
he's a good man who's adopted 32,000 children. He'll be, so we're getting this temple trip together. We had this great idea of inviting the saints to go to the temple. They don't know much about the temple. They didn't grow up with knowing about it. They've never seen one. It's not like us, who just is surrounded by it and we're taught since
Yeah,
we're little. They have no idea. So we're like, let's take them to the open house in Nairobi. This is out of Tanzania, and let them see it and experience, and then they can go home and get their recommends and go back and get endowed, because that would be our
yeah,
main goal. And
yeah,
so we invited Molly to come from Kenya. He's wanting to come and bring 70 of his people, and we put this sign up out there to see who would come from Tanzania, and we thought we might get 30 people. I think we're probably going to have a good 150 to 200 of these early fresh saints uh, get on buses and go with us over. So it
yeah.
sort of grew into this big undertaking. So
That's cool.
it's like a good problem, but wow, yeah.
Yeah. So, have you focused on a certain part of Africa with a lot of your humanitarian work, or you've been all over?
We This group I'm with, we drill wells mostly in Tanzania, and then we've gone into Uganda and Malawi. We've done a lot of wells in Malawi, really, really needed, and some
Hmm.
in Kenya. So we
Yeah,
we branched out a bit, but most of our work has been in Tanzania
and that so
and
a lot of
Kenya.
that's mainly Eastern Africa, right?
Yeah, Eastern Africa.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
And has it always been through a specific like a humanitarian organization, or
Yes, yes, I go with, Hearts and Hands for Humanity is the organization that I went with. I'm also involved with some other humanitarian groups that go down as well. So I've got my feet in a few different pots down there, but Hearts and Hands is how we're doing this temple trip. And
yeah? And then, so how many years collectively have you been involved with humanitarian work there?
Probably about 8 years.
Oh, wow. Great. And it, like, maybe just give us more of a general, you talk about this temple dynamic with how people they're familiar with the temple, but they don't kind of have that experience with it. How else would you describe just your observation of the church in Africa currently?
I just see humble people who love God, and they don't make it crazy complicated. They're very simple. They're they feel deeply and they love deeply. And when I was talking just 2 weeks ago, I was there talking to them about the temple and this experience, and they want what God wants them to have. It's very, very sweet, and there's gonna be all kinds, and people who they're so poor and they're so struggling that there are gonna be those who might see it as a vehicle to something better, which it is, but more in a monetary sense. But, I took some money from, uh, Sister Oaks actually gave me $100 when I was going and said, "Just do something, with the branch." She's like, "Just do something." And so I went there and asked the branch president, like, "Is there something you could do with the people here? Is there somebody that really needs something?" He goes, "No, we're doing pretty good." I'm like, "These people have 1 meal a day. They have to walk, 6 hours to get water or whatever." Like, their life is so hard, but he just said, "I can't think of anything." And so that's who they are. They're most of the ones I see are just they want a better life for their families and they love God.
Yeah. Yeah. And they just are attracted to the gospel, right? Just that,
Yes,
the,
they're just drawn.
yeah. And what are you seeing as
Yeah.
far as just like the institutional church there, as far as area presidencies or what the church is doing? Obviously they have their own humanitarian efforts and things like that, or ways that the church is helping, you know, move people towards the temple, or anything else come to mind as far as what the actual institutional church is doing.
Well, we've got a 70 over Kenya, and they just made their first stake in Dar es Salaam, which is in Tanzania. And so we've spent a lot of time with like a couple of last mission presidents there. They're both natives of Africa. And, these guys are pretty new and pretty in there. It's just fascinating to watch. They have the dedication, but they don't need so much help that we enable them and that we take away that sweet purity that they have, because they have a lot of good things we don't have here that we're missing. And their simpleness and their simple life and their just not being offended and so loving and willing to do what God asks them to do, and just all kinds of stuff. Not that we're not, but our life is busy and fast paced, and we have all this cultural stuff going on, and we have a lot that I learned from them.
Yeah. Yeah, just those little nuances we take for granted, right? That
Oh
of course,
yeah,
you just go to the stake president's office, and there is an office, and they know how to use it, they know how to log in, they, can just move that process forward. And sometimes there's those maybe cultural hiccups there that confuse members or
absolutely.
make it more difficult than it has to be, right?
There's a lady there that had been a member for quite a while and there without any church, but she had joined a long time ago. She's really old and sick. And she said, "Brenda, I just want a patriarchal blessing before I die," which she's not going to get because you have to have a stake and you have to have all this stuff. And so all of that is just, it's, it's hard stuff, but it's the newness and the freshness and the devotion is just so inspiring.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful.
What was the feeling when a temple was announced there in Nairobi? I mean, was that something? How do they interpret that? I mean, are they excited? Like, we're excited here, or are they maybe still not understanding the the accomplishment that is, or that step?
I suspect those that have been in the church a while are just elated and um, overjoyed. The ones that I've been working with, they just don't know what to be excited about.
Yeah,
Like, and so we're trying to teach them. And actually, this little branch started doing temple prep classes just for them to take this trip in there so they understand more. But just not understanding, not ever, we just take for granted all of that they know the scriptures, they know that there was Solomon's temple and all that. So it's exciting to them, but they don't really know how excited to get about that, because endowments, sealing your family together forever. I tried to teach them that when I was there a couple of weeks ago. What does that mean to them? And how does that word even translate? When they were translating it, the missionaries were translating it to them. I don't even know. So we got a long ways to go. And so that's kind of why we thought, well, let's get them over there and let them be there physically. It's only a 6-hour drive. And let them feel the spirit. These people, they can feel the spirit, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's interesting because, we hear these stories about members across the world, maybe in less than first world countries who make significant sacrifice to travel to do their temple work. And so we often hyper focus on that of how can we get temples closer to people, or how can we get people closer to temples so they can do their work. But we often maybe miss that step, especially in these countries that are so new to the church, or members that are so new to the church. They don't even maybe understand the significance in order to reach for it. And so by giving them an experience with the temple, like the open house or the dedication, that can maybe shift that paradigm. And then they're like, okay, I can't wait to come back and do my work now that I have a deeper understanding of just how holy this place is.
that's what we're hoping. That's kind of our idea of that. And it will work. Like, they're so excited. We can't believe that we had, I mean, they're very, very excited to go. And I don't even know if they know what they're so excited about, but they're excited.
Yeah. Well, it's a good field trip. I mean, I'm always game for a field trip. Let's go see
That's
something.
true. That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
And we're having them put some skin in the game. Like, they've got to get it's called an emergency passport for just a little bit. They have to get a yellow fever shot. They have to do some stuff to be able to go. So we want them to participate in it. We don't want to hand things to them. That's probably one of the toughest stuff all over in these countries is don't go in and ruin them. Let's don't go in and enable them. Let's give them some fish and teach them how to, and let's give them things that will help them improve their country, but not hurt them. And I see a lot
Yeah.
of do-gooders hurting people there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole humanitarian charitable industry, there's a lot of good happening, but there's sometimes some shady stuff that happens far too much, unfortunately. So
Absolutely.
maybe break down the dynamics, because I think this is something that where we as a leading saints organization would love to figure out ways we can help. And so essentially you need funds to pay for the buses and maybe like, meals or, room and board type of thing once they get there, or what's the dynamic of actually getting people to the Nairobi temple?
Well, it's not real expensive, but we probably should have raised the money before we invited them. We we just did not expect this, and like I say, a lot of United States missionaries are there, and they are so excited. Oh my goodness, these guys are so excited,
Yeah.
but they can't cross into another country, so they can't even go, and they're so bummed. But they're really working with these people. They're just so excited. So yes, we've got to bus them in. 6-hour bus drive into Nairobi. We'll have to stay the night because of the drive. Get up the next morning, go through the temple, and then bring them home. And we'll feed them and give them water. Although they could do the whole trip without anything because they're probably used to that. So that will be very expensive. We figured out it would be probably about $100 a person to get them there and back, and including helping them if they need help with emergency passport or the whatever, so that they're not, because some of them are so poor that would never happen. So anyway, we're that's what we're looking at right now. So it's not a lot. It'll be a pretty simple trip. And then if they come back and get their endowments or their temple recommend to do their endowments or get families and then get families sealed, whatever, the church actually has a fund that helps them go get their first time endowment. So that was
Yeah.
really cool to find that out, that
Yeah. That's
they
cool.
have that, which is great. So
Yeah. So hopefully this trip will sort of put them on that path or in that mindset of getting to the temple.
it will speed it up for sure. There's no doubt.
So is there a specific number of like people that you're trying to get there, or a number of buses, or I mean, are a lot of people aware of it, want to join, or I give us the numbers as far as what you're aiming for?
they're aware. The missionaries are working it, and in both these towns where we have the branches, Arusha and Moshi, and we have investigators signed up. We have mostly members, but a lot of investigators. We told them to invite their neighbors if they're interested in the gospel. So it's helping the missionaries with work. It's just put a little bit of energy into the whole thing.
And is there a certain, like, I imagine each bus, I don't know, the typical bus
Oh,
here holds
yeah.
about 40 people. I mean, is that what you're looking at? Or?
That's probably about it. Um, well, when I was there 2 weeks ago, this bus passed me, and there was 3 people in the one bucket seat of the passenger up front, 3 people sitting on it. So these guys are used to loading in. We don't wanna do that to them, but we're
Yeah.
probably looking at 10 buses or so. We get 150 people, we could have 200. We could put most of these bus sizes, you could probably put 25 comfortably on it. So we may have to get a little more cramped, and then we'll have one of us on each of the buses, and we'll do some teaching. We'll let them teach us. We'll sing a lot of songs, and it'll be kind of fun. So if anybody wants to come and go, you can. It'll be great.
Nice.
And
Awesome.
then we'll go into there and meet Molly with his family, and the 70 will help us go through there with him. And he's bringing his choir, who are unbelievable. If you want to look up the Molly's choir, and we're going to have them sing out on the temple grounds, and it's going to be kind of cool. So
Awesome. Well, that's exciting. I hope you'll send and share some pictures of the event and
I
things. And
will.
like I said, I think this is why I want to get the episode out as soon as possible. Is we as a Leading Saints organization would love to facilitate some of that. So we're going to put a link in the show notes that'll point to a specific form, and obviously all donations through there is coming through Leading Saints, so it's tax deductible, and then we will pass all each one of those dollars on to this effort of getting as many of these awesome Latter-day Saints to experience the temple and get in the mindset of engaging further with the doctrine there in the temple and their own ordinances that can happen there. So yeah, this would be fun to partner on and make happen.
That is very exciting, and we're very, very grateful.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, I think this is great. I think it there's some good energy behind this, and that we can maybe help some saints in Africa, and what a wonderful effort that will be. Well, let me first ask you this question before I ask my last question: is if people wanted to learn more about you, about your coaching, about if they feel like a sideline single adult that just needs someone to talk to, where would you send them?
I'm a life coach and a trainer. So faith-based life coaching academy.com is the website for my life coaching. And the books that I wrote are on Amazon. Why Not Me and Breaking the Yokes That Bind Us. Hearts and Hands for Humanity is the organization that we're doing this temple trip with.
Awesome. Perfect. And last question I have for you is, as you reflect on your time as a leader, how has being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
I In so many ways, and I'm so grateful for the leadership opportunities so that I could be a better follower. Even if they pass around something for a Relief Society activity, I know the time they put in. I know their hopes for this, and I'm in. Like, I want to be in. And I think recognizing that people can look really good at church and really good when you see them out, and that being a leader, you've got to see that so many people, well, everyone bears burdens and struggles. And so I look at people in um, in a different way, like not having expectations of them in their life, knowing that they've all got a story, and they all could use an arm around them. And uh, so, yes, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I was able to be a leader so that I can be a better follower and be a better support, and be um, the person that looks around for something to do to help. Just it's so appreciated as a leader to have those, like say this STP, same 10 people, and it's like I want to be one of those that can show up for them to support them.